missing water, anytime that you have to bid. Or when people pass and they see you, oh my Lord, used to feel that shame.
May I ask you to remain standing, please? Ladies of the PNM gathered here tonight at Queen's Hall, ladies of Trinidad and Tobago, I ask you to stand for a moment's recognition of the passing of one of the stalwarts of the PNM, former chairman of the Port of Spain South constituency, who for virtually all her adult life held office in the PNM. I refer to Miss Jean Elder of Port of Spain South, who passed away a couple of days ago. It really is the end of an era with the passing of a woman commonly called Jean. Lady Vice Chairman of the PNM, Mrs. Camille Robinson Regis, and I dare say the Member of Parliament to be on August 11th, coming out of Aruka Maloney, where Aruka Maloney boasts the largest number of votes cast for a PNM candidate. But I'm also advised that that has nothing to do with the candidate. It's all about the political leader. I also tonight would recognize with great anxiety precious new people. Tonight you saw the PNM's standard bearer for St. Augustine, Renuka Sejam Singh Suklal. If there was any yardstick to be measured by to be a PNM candidate, Renuka has tonight passed with flying colors. And welcoming back home to you here, the women of the PNM and of Trinidad and Tobago, our ambassador who served with distinction in New York, who I must say, matured in New York. The Member of Parliament for Arima on the 11th of August, Mrs. Penelope Beckers Robinson, answering a call to duty in a different location. We're stronger, we're better for having her in the lineup. And also, another bright new face, but experienced, hardworking, straightforward and cool. PNM standard bearer in Faizabad, Solange D'Souza. And the only Seventh-day Adventist to carry the title of Minister of Bacchanal in Trinidad and Tobago, the Member of Parliament for St. Anne's East, which is Nian Gadsby Dolly. This can only happen in Trinidad and Tobago. And of course, another brand new standard bearer who distinguishes herself in this election. Not a passenger, but coming with a good understanding of her people and their future. And realizing that the best choice for Princestown, their candidate, is Sharon Abula. And coming out of Tobago East to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, the women, girls, and boys of Trinidad and Tobago. All eyes would be on Tobago East, because some people have said that Tobago East is in play. I say, yes, it's in play, because some people think this is plaything. But on the night of August 10th, we will play that drum and beat them like a drum in Tobago East. Ayana Webster Roy for Tobago East. And of course, there's a candidate in Diego Martin West. Presenting the candidate for Diego Martin West, presented by the women of the PNM, as the only candidate allowed on the stage tonight who is not a woman. A real man. Ladies and gentlemen, as Prime Minister, it doesn't matter who the Prime Minister is, whether it's Eric Williams, Patrick Manning, George Chambers, Kamala Persad-Bissessar, and Iana Robinson. When you are Prime Minister of this country of Trinidad and Tobago, and probably any country, it's a very difficult job. Not because the load is heavy to carry, or because it is beyond your ability, based on your intellect or your commitment, but it usually involves decision-making. As a leader of a country, that leadership is tested every day because the government has to make thousands of decisions. And most of them go right, and most of them are taken in stride. But every so often, the leaders have to make decisions that are far-reaching, that are, invoking emotions, and sometimes decisions that could be game changers, permanent game changers, life or death. Fortunately, we are not in a situation of having to commit troops to battle or fight off neighbors who want our territory, but we have other decisions to make. And as your Prime Minister, I have never fallen in love with this job. But I've always taken it very seriously because I know that everybody else in the country depends on the decisions that I make with my cabinet colleagues, with the public service, and so on and so on. It's a very important job to always be taken seriously. And I trust that at the end of this term, my first term as Prime Minister, that the average person in Trinidad and Tobago, regardless of what your persuasion might be, ethnic, religious, otherwise, that you would think of me as a Prime Minister who has taken this job seriously and has made serious decisions in the best interest of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. My motivation in this is that it must be the best decision that could be made. And if at the end of the day, when I have to account to the people, they disagree with my tenure, then I would be the proudest person as long as you are of the view that during my term of office as Prime Minister, I made the best decisions under all the circumstances in conducting your affairs as the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And that is why when we were confronted out of nowhere at the beginning of 2020, 2020 was scheduled to be a year that we were going to do a number of things in this country. A lot of things were poised to happen. And we woke up and were warned of the coming of an epidemic, which became a pandemic. And of course, as soon as anything has to happen in this country, the one thing you get in floods and basketfuls is advice. At the office of the Prime Minister, not just in my office as Prime Minister, all Prime Ministers, you get a whole mountain of advice. You have to now determine what is good advice and what is bad advice. Because some of that advice, if you take it, you get into so much trouble that you might be chased out of office the next weekend. And some of it contains pearls of wisdom. As a Prime Minister, you have to determine what advice you take, what advice you ignore. And some advice comes to you as instructions, because some of the people who give you advice, they take the position, I tell you so. You're not doing what I tell you. One of them is the opposition leader. As soon as COVID crossed the Atlantic or the Pacific and got to us, and we realized that we had to respond to it, the first advice I got from the opposition leader is to declare a state of emergency. That was the advice I was getting from the opposition, declare a state of emergency. And I thought that that was not going to work because the response to this virus is personal. It requires a personal response. And I took the decision that we would manage this as a group of individuals, the people of this country, talking to you, explaining to you, making you understand and making you take those personal decisions as much as you are able to. And it is because I had tremendous confidence in the role that the women were going to play in this matter that I was sure that that decision making of relying on the population's good sense, that the women of this country would understand and would get the men to fall in line if they were inclined not to. As you all know, I was raised by my grandfather, right? My grandfather raised me. He had a wife. She was a woman to be reckoned with. My grandfather was a strong man. But he always told you, ask the wife. And anytime you hear, ask the wife, you know you're in trouble. Because she made the firm and the decision that he couldn't make because he was strong, but he was soft-hearted. Anytime a decision had to be made, and I must tell the story. There was a man, my grandfather lent some money. In those days, $300 was a lot of money. He lent this man, as he normally would do all the time, lent this man $300. The poor man wasn't dealing in cash because we lived off the land, off whatever we produced. We didn't have much cash in hand. And the poor man was an honest man. Couldn't find his way to pay the money back. But my grandmother felt he borrowed the money, he must pay it back. And I would be hearing my grandmother telling my grandfather every now and then, they get back the money. And eventually, she instigated him to sue the man. And the poor man used to hide. He used to go into the garden at night, come back in at night. Those days, police used to work real hard. Mariah police go under the man's house. 4 o'clock in the morning. The man is now leaving to go back in the bush. Mariah police pick him up and is walking him from Mariah to Scarborough. In those days, police didn't tell you they were walking because they had no resources, they had no car. They were walking from Mariah to Scarborough. By dawn there in Mason Hall. Me and my grandfather are just leaving to go out to our bush. Meet the policeman taking Mr. Man to the man met my grandfather on the road. And he said, Mr. Rowley, they're taking me down to jail. I come to ask you for a chance. My grandfather said to the policeman, well, you had to go and ask your wife. As soon as I heard that, I turned around and I ran back home around the corner, tell my granny, Mommy, police coming to Granny Smith. My grandmother's eyes opened wide. And she stood on the step and she waited. And as the police came with Mr. Smith, before Mr. Smith could open his mouth, it was my grandmother's conduct. I went to the courthouse, down the road. So, many years later, I'm a PNM candidate, and I'm doing house-to-house canvassing. And I ended up by this old man in Mariah, in Woodland, and I gave him my spiel, I'm the PNM candidate, I'm here. And the man is looking at me and he's listening to me. And when I was finished, the man said to me, you are Joe Rowley's grandson? I said, yes. He said, your grandfather was a good man. Your grandfather was a good man. And then I realized I was talking to Mr. Smith. So I tell you this story so that it's not only now women who are in charge. And they know when to make hard decisions. And it is the women of this country that's going to save this country if this country is going to be saved. When I became opposition leader, Kamala Prasad Bissessa became prime minister, and they say him go around. She was Prime Minister for the first time. I was opposition leader. And something happened in this country that I always remind you all of. The government, led by Kamala Prasad Bisesa, with a sprinkling of women in the government, of course, came to the parliament and produced a budget for the national service. That budget was debated in the parliament. I led the opposition then. It was my first budget response as an opposition leader. And I did something which was never done in this country before, never done in the PNM before. I voted for the budget produced by the government of Kamala Prasad Bisesa. The record will show that the PNM in opposition voted for the national budget presented by Kamala Prasad Bisesa. And if anybody ever got a chance in this country, in the politics of this country, that was the biggest chance ever given to anybody in this country. To get the opposition to vote for the national budget, because ritualistically, opposition don't vote for government budget. But I did that because I thought we were going to start a new era. Within 2 months, I knew I had made a fundamental mistake and there was no hope of what I naively thought was a new era. And it came to pass that within 2 months, some of the things that were mentioned here tonight by my colleague who chairs this meeting were things that you all would have experienced. After that disappointment, I contested leading from the PNM, and Mrs. Prasad Bisesa was leading from the government. And you say, beat them in the east, beat them in the west, beat them in the north, beat them in the south. You, the people, have had reason to select the PNM and its leadership over that leadership that she provided in 2 THA elections, a by-election in St. Joseph, 2 local government elections, and a general election. She lost every one. And it had nothing to do with her gender. It had everything to do with the quality of leadership she provided to the people of Trinidad and Tobago, whether it's in Tobago, in a by-election or a general election. And I have every confidence that on August 10th, the same thing will happen again. Because nothing has happened to change that paradigm. Nothing. And for the few moments I talk to you tonight, let me just take you to some couple of serious things. Election campaigns allow leaders to present their party's offerings, to commit yourself by manifesto or by programs or by policies that you speak about, so that the electorate could know exactly what you're going to do when you're going into office, even if you accidentally keep your promise. There are a couple of things I want you women, the women, to pay attention to. Because see, my grandmother was not the first generation of women in this country who ran the household. She wasn't. You, many of you women, you know that you are running your households, especially women who are single mothers in this country, women who are looking after children. I know this country very well, and I know where the pulse is. And that is why when I became Prime Minister, I chose a woman who has a household experience, and I put in the office of the Prime Minister the whole question of women and girls and children in the office of the Prime Minister. That was not accidental. That was so I could keep my eye on it. I could keep my eye on it. And when a party comes up and says to you through its leader, in a time when we are very concerned about the country's spending pattern and our ability to raise revenue to pay our bills as a nation and to service the population, and you get a proposal from the opposition led by the same leader of failed numbers saying to you that she has a brainwave. She has a brainwave. You know, sometimes when you get brainwaves, either you take something or you drink something or you fall down and bounce your head, you could get a brainwave. She has a brainwave, and that brainwave is to mobilize the idle resources of the UTC, the Unit Trust Corporation. Take note of that. The unit trust, the savings in the unit trust are not to be threatened by the government. Those are the savings of little people, many of them women who provide the only hope to keep their children safe and whole. You don't want no leader of no government seeing that as no solution for expediency in dealing with the country's revenue situation. What is required here is not to go up and play fast and loose with people's savings in a place like the UTC, but to come up with proposals and policies and initiatives to raise additional revenue. Not to go and play the fool with other people's money that they put a little thing aside. And it doesn't end there. The brainwave flashes across to the NIB. I don't know how many of you know how precarious the NIB is now, because the actuaries have put proposals to the Parliament pointing out that the NIB requires certain interventions which also would require hard decisions to be made. So that when you retire from whatever job you are in now, a pension could be there for you. And as a woman, you're pregnant, you get maternity leave, and you get a maternity benefit from the National Insurance Board. People are telling you now, they're coming to play fast and loose with that. Because this brainwave say that the way to develop the country is to use the idle resources. They will come and tell you after I speak here tonight that there are ways of doing it. Whatever ways of doing it, those ways are already in place. The NIB and the UTC taking part in the country's financial system. Whenever the government goes out with bonding or so, they take all part in it. It doesn't require any manifesto promise to come and interfere with it. What you see, what you're being offered there is a chance to do what happened in NGC. And the people who are promising that are not people to be taken lightly. Of all the people in Trinidad and Tobago, the UNC leader pick out certain people, pick them out by their record to make them part of her team. What she's offering, is a new cabal. There was a cabal that Jack Warner spoke about, that Gypsy sang about. There's a song by Gypsy, the cabal, right? Most of them have gone. What is being offered to you is a new cabal, but cabal none the same. Boyfriends, girlfriends, associates, they all have something in common. And they revere the conduct of the current opposition leader. One of them from Talparo, Lahoketa, that seat up there, was involved in running the Piarco Airport when a major government project took place up there. I don't know if you recall or you want to remember, the contract that was awarded for that Piarco Airport project was awarded through the National Insurance Board. You remember that? The contract was awarded without tender, and when we questioned it as being illegal, they went to the National Insurance Board and changed the tender rules in the National Insurance Board. Changed the English language to say that all male equal female and all it becomes R, and all singular equal plural. They had to make that change because the contract was an illegal award because it required competitive tendering. And since they didn't do competitive tendering, and they awarded the contract without tender, they had broken the tender rules, and they had to make that ridiculous change in the NIB tender rules to allow the contract not to be challenged in court. I'm sure you all forgot that. But let me remind you all, it's the same set of people coming to tell you now that they get brainwave as to how to handle NIB money, to treat with the country's falling revenues at a time when expenditures are way above revenues. And of course, that resulted in people being arrested and jailed in America. But the other partner of the firm is the one who went to the Parliament and used the Parliament to prevent people from going to the court to get conviction of some kind for the same NIB started contract that ended up as the biggest scandal in Trinidad and Tobago. You all forget that? They want you to forget that. So when they tell you they're going to do it, all I'm asking you to do tonight, ladies, is take it seriously. Take the threat seriously. They tell you that they are going to devalue the currency. Well, all you single mothers for whom this PNM and this Prime Minister is concerned about the dollar in your pocket and the value of it, understand that there's another option. Today, I met with, general courtesy call, talking to the leadership of Tutor, who asked to see me, and I saw them. We had a very cordial meeting. And I also met with the Nurses Association. So this morning I met with the Nurses Association, I met with Tutor, and we talked about the country's situation. They don't report to me as Prime Minister, they report to a minister. But as Prime Minister, they could talk to me about what is happening with them and the ministry that they're responsible for. And I had to explain to them that the first hurdle that we have to cross in this country is to try and preserve what we have and where we are at. When I became Prime Minister, in the advice column was a piece of advice that said, devalue the currency to between 8 and 10 to $1 US. You women who run households, who manage men, and who raise children, you would know exactly what that means for you. It would mean the minute you do that, the dollar in your pocket can do far less. Because once you do that, it is those people who are least able to look after themselves for whom the pressure will fall. The taxi driver will raise the fare because he buying parts and he buying tire, fare had to go up. Those in the grocery will tell you we're importing goods, and the food in this country is largely imported. All they're talking about food price. The minute you devalue the currency, immediately, huge rise in the price of staple food, right? Even with basic food being zero rated for VAT, the price will skyrocket. And of course, even if you get more dollars per month, because you got to pay increase of how many percent, the value of the dollar would have gone down, so you are no better off even though the numbers are bigger in your pay packet. But those who think it's arithmetic and says, look, balance the budget by converting our US dollar earnings, multiplying it by 10 instead of by 6.75, and you get more Trinidad and Tobago dollars, all they're saying to us is impoverish you to balance the budget in numbers and numerical exercise, but as an exercise as to how you live, what you can pay for, and what pressure you will take, that is a disaster in the waiting. And I'll tell you, I'm not here saying that devaluations ought not to happen or cannot happen, but it must be as a last resort. When all else fails, some people even refuse to do the devaluation. And the devaluation devalues them, because sometimes it's a common sense action. But if it is a politically expedient action, because you have nothing else to say or to offer, it is dangerous. We have managed this country for 5 years, and our opponents keep telling you, the government collapsed, the country will collapse. And I would tell you, it did not collapse. Even in the face of COVID, where we had to borrow and spend large amounts of money to keep the country alive, it didn't collapse. And under the PNM, it will not collapse. And you think my warning to you about what they could do with NIB and NIB, you think that's a joke? They did it at the NGC. If they had told you in 2010 that they were going to bail out the $16 billion in the NGC account, I'm sure their mouthpieces and their columnist supporters and their radio announcer supporters would have said the PNM just scaremongering. If they had mentioned that to you, that they intended to go into the NGC and spend out every dollar, the last $1 billion they gave to a contractor, pay him 80% of the money when 40% of the work was done. So the day the election came and they lose the election, the contractor left the country. You have a right to leave. If you get 80% of the money and 40% of the job is done, what you come back there for? But you got paid already. Contractor gone, never to come back. Understand? So when they tell you they're going to do something, their record shows that they are capable of doing it. When the joint, there's something called the JCC, the Joint Consultative Council. It's made up of all the professions in the construction industry. Contractors, engineers, QSs. They told that Prime Minister, who I voted for her budget, do not award that Highway 2.14 contract to one contractor. Break it up into pieces. And so a number of contractors will have different sections of the highway. But they made the deal with one contractor. And they awarded the contract to one contractor. $7 billion worth. Biggest contract ever awarded in Trinidad and Tobago. To one contractor. And what we were fearful was going to happen actually happened. The contractor was found guilty of corruption in Brazil. The contractor went bankrupt. The highway project was stopped. And the contractor left the country holding the bonds that bonded the contract of almost $1 billion. Then you change the government. And then we discovered that the last working day of that government under that prime minister, they removed the clause in the contract that protected you, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, that says, if the contractor goes bankrupt, as it did, that the bonds are callable and the money belongs to the government. They removed that clause from the contract on the Friday before election. It took us fights in courts abroad to get that money back. $921 million. So I tell you, when they tell you they're going to do something, don't say they can't do it. Don't say they haven't done it. Today, that highway is being completed, having been restarted, with a series of local contractors, all local contractors, building the highway to Point 14. And there's one other little story. Having advised me up front to declare a state of emergency. And all that does is remove the constitutional protection and give police more powers. What more powers do police need? You saw those videos from Pakistan and India, how the police there deal with people and COVID. It's blows in the street, you know. Bamboo poles. And they're beating you in car, on motorbike, on foot. That's how it's allowed out there. There's one video of a mosque in Pakistan where they came by the door of the mosque because they were told not to congregate. They went to, what do you call it, on a Friday? Juma. They went to Juma. The police inspector came and stand up by the door, and a couple of lower-ranked officers suitably armed with their bamboo, and as they come out the mosque, some ran and left their shoe, some came back for their shoe, some didn't get it, and it blows by the mosque door, you know. That didn't happen in Trinidad and Tobago, because in Trinidad and Tobago, we talk to our people, and the government has confidence in our people, and we manage this without that. And for those of you, especially women, who have influence on the rest of the population, tell them that this is not a joke. Tell them that what little you can do, you must do it. Wear a mask if you're out among people. Keep cleansing yourself with the sanitizers and soap and water. And as far as you are able to, keep distance between you and the next person. That's all you have to do. The rest will be done by other public policy. The public policy that says, since Miami is the closest contact between us and the United States. And today, Miami is ground zero in the world for COVID. We have to keep our borders closed. And once you're keeping your borders closed, if you want to preserve what you've done inside this country, protecting men, women, and children, you have to bring people in a situation where you can control the quarantine. There's one Caribbean country that did a little more favorable response, allowed people to come home in large numbers because they didn't want to take the pressure of bringing them home in a managed number, where as you bring them in, you put them in government quarantine, so you know exactly who's in quarantine, and you keep them there, and they only come out after they have been deemed to be negative, and then you bring some more in, and so on and so on. So it's an ongoing process, a long process, but at least you're doing it safely. One Caribbean country went and allowed people to come home and go into private quarantine. What do you expected to happen? They come home, they're glad to come home, and they go on the quarantine themselves. But then what happens after that? They either allow people to come and meet them, because he wasn't home for a long time, I see you. Or they go out and meet people. We have had people here who were in quarantine. While they're in quarantine, they're making fuss to go and visit people. So you could imagine if they were home in their house on voluntary quarantine. And all you need in Trinidad and Tobago to upset this whole apple cart is one person who is carrying that virus and is infecting us. And if you get 2 or 3 or 4, better still, and they walk around us. There was one famous individual who came in here and knew that he had tested positive and run up and down the country. You all remember that? Well, that was a harbinger of things to come if we had not acted properly. So, managing the country's affairs is not always a popularity contest. It's a case of making the decisions that have to be made because somebody has to make it. And one thing I can tell you, while I've always been caring, because I love this country and I love the people of this country, and you gave me a responsibility that I take very seriously, I have never shied away from making the decisions to protect the people of Trinidad and Tobago's interests. So, they're going to open the borders. Because to keep people outside and bring them in on a managed, controlled, safe way, you just have to lie. I was the one when asked by the press about how many people are out there wanting to come in. I did tell you up front that we have 330,000 people outside there who can come home. They hold our passports with their children if they have to. But most of the people live out there. They live out there. But really, who are on the move, who want to come back home? We said, okay, well, after 2 months, the figure is in the order of about 8,000 or thereabouts, of which you brought back more than half. And the others are coming in. Every week we bring in a batch and so on. Opposition leader telling you that I have abandoned 10,000 people outside. If the figure that we're dealing with is about 8,000 approximately, and we bring in over 4,000, why is she telling you that I abandoned 10,000 people outside? You know why? To sensationalize it. The truth is too difficult to be spoken because it doesn't fit the agenda. There is no 10,000 application there. Of the approximately 8,000, and if you want to say it's approximately 10,000, fine, but we already brought half of them home. So when you hear this shrill screech of the tongue crier about 10,000, ask yourself why. So we got the advice to declare state of emergency. Now we are being equated with slave masters. And has the insult to listen to that this is worse than slavery. An act that is meant to protect your life. The only sensible act being made around the world by leaders around the world. But in Trinidad and Tobago, it has to be so presented. I tell you this so you could understand who is offering themselves as alternative leadership in this country. And then, of course, they demanded, they want to be a part of the decision-making, demand meeting with me. I met with her. Not that I'm surprised. She had nothing to offer. Brought to me one of their parliamentarian, but that parliamentarian in the parliament is no better doctor than anybody else. What are you offering me? They have a cure that the government doesn't know about. I said, oh, what is this cure? Because I know if there's a cure, the health department or the Dr. Parasham would know about it. What is this cure? I'm a doctor, but I'm a geologist. Rocks don't need no cure. Volcanoes cannot be cured by human beings. So what is the cure? Hydroxychloroquine. I said, okay, we find out. Turn out the thing is a poison. The thing is a poison. One country tried to use it, kill endless people. And you are being warned, the WHO, World Health Organization, knowing that people like our opposition leader and other leaders are advising you to use hydroxychloroquine and making you feel that there's a cure for COVID when there is none. The WHO put out a warning to the world, do not use hydroxychloroquine. It's a treatment for malaria and it's very damaging and dangerous if used for COVID. So thank you, UNC doctors. Thanks, but no thanks. We're not going to poison ourselves. That's what it is. And then to add insult to injury and damaging your intellect. The hottest place in the world sometimes is New Delhi in India at this time of year. New Delhi in India. Texas always hot, even in winter. California is a sunshine state, and so is Florida. But in Trinidad and Tobago, we have a cure for COVID. Sunlight kill COVID. I understand that if Carnival was this month, should I make the road march? But you see, these might sound humorous, but these are the serious decisions that a leader has to make. And if you are averse to making them for whatever reason because you're compromised, you end up with a whole shebang of people going for the polling day, you give them safe seat, you say safe seat, but Princeton is not safe. You pick a set of people, all of whom are beholden to you for one reason or the other. And as far as you're concerned, the country's business would be better served between you, your drinking partners, girlfriend here, boyfriend there, banker there, bagman there, bagwoman there. What is Trinidad and Tobago getting involved in that for? What? Why? We come under pressure from external forces to do things that don't make sense for our people. They join with them to attack us, asking for sanctions on Trinidad and Tobago. We get help abroad to buy vessels we can't pay for because we have no money. You're attacking those who helped us to get it. What do you want them in office in Trinidad and Tobago for? They come into office, if they're lucky on August 10th, for one purpose and one purpose only, to look after their own personal and private interests. And one of those interests is to avoid the completion of police investigations from the last tenure. I told you about the relationship I sought to build when I, as opposition leader, voted for the budget and looked for a period of working with the government. Today I can tell you, political hell has no fury like a failed political leader. Whenever she speaks about me, the hatred drips, the scorn. You can't, me? Matters not to me. Not working for you. I'm working for the women and children and the men of Trinidad and Tobago. So tonight, ladies here gathered, Women's League, and your 4 candidates, you have done us proud. You've demonstrated that there is value in old stages. That there's great promise in medium stages. And there's excitement in the youth and the vigor of the new ones. The PNM Women's League, once again, is serving its party without batting an eyelid, standing in the breach for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. I have every confidence that you, the women, will get your colleagues, the men, to understand that a decision has to be made on August 10th, that you have to come out and vote. It is by voting that you choose the options that are available. If the options I just mentioned coming from the other side are the options that you want and you prefer, you vote for it. But if on the other hand you want to continue using the option that gives this country its best chance in a difficult time, in a difficult period, and to give your children and your grandchildren a future, then you vote for the People's National Movement. So, PNM women, I look forward to you holding the PNM standard high in every corner of Trinidad and Tobago. From Tobago East to Princestown, to Faizabad, to Aruca Maloney, and of course, Indigo Martin West, where the candidate is also a PNM standard bearer. So tonight we have in our presence a number of our other female candidates who are campaigning in other constituencies. And I would take the opportunity to ask them to come on stage, if they are, but I just call the names. Those who are here, come and join us on stage. And if you're not on stage, you give us a shout out wherever you are. Chamfa Kojo, Tobago West. Sharon Archie, Caroni East. Leah Ramuta, Oraput West. Lisa Morris Julian of Arima. On stage already, you had a taste of her tonight. The committed Akel Bisoun from Chaguanas West. And you have not yet heard on a woman's platform, but you will. You will hear Rebecca Dipnarayan of Siparia. And taking our standard and taking it high in Couva North, Shada Secham, Couva North. St. Augustine, stand. Renuka Segam Singh, Suplal. Arima, Penelope Beckles. St. Anne's East, Diane Gatsby Dolly. Faizabad, Solange de Souza. Tobago East, Ayana Webster Roy. And of course, the Babulal, who I just mixed up with Bisu. Excuse me, I was trying to get it right. Stan, you've been here all night and you did wonderfully well tonight. Give her a round of applause. Sharon Babulal of Princestown. And the lady in charge of the Women's League in the PNM, the lady vice chairman of the PNM, the member of parliament for Aruca Maloney, Mrs. Camille Robinson Regis. The PNM is well served by talent from all corners of our country. So we confidently go out and campaign as we advance all these distinguished women. So I ask you, women, to join the PNM in bringing home this victory. As you go to the polling station, and you put your X to by the ballot, give these women responsibility. They can carry it. They have carried it. They will carry it. Put the country's affairs in the hands of these women who will lead the men who make up the rest of the 41 of our team. So tonight, I congratulate all of you for offering to represent your country, for offering to take responsibility for your country. And on the night of August 10th, when the results are in, we will join these women and all other PNM candidates and join the whole country who will get and say, rise and say, East, West, North, South, and Central, in response to a PNM victory, we'll say, great is the PNM, great is the PNM, great is the PNM, and we shall prevail.
Great is the PNM, great is the PNM, great is the PNM, somebody.